Welcome to the stream, everybody. Here we are again, back in action, learning more about the ancient Greeks. Today, we are not just learning about one group of Greeks, we're learning about two, and one particular battle that took place during what's known as the Peloponnesian War. So what we're going to be discussing today is this lovely little city right here. This city is a city called Amphipolis. Amphipolis was an interesting story in the grand scheme of the Peloponnesian War, so I'm excited to share it with you guys. There are many key battles, but this one in particular is pretty important. We're going to be talking about a couple of leaders, so make sure that you're paying attention to a couple of names that are going to be mentioned. And without further ado, let's talk to our boy Herodotus.
Welcome to Amphipolis, traveler. The Battle of Amphipolis was surely an interesting one. One might even call it anticlimactic. But that does not mean it wasn't important in the greater scheme of the Peloponnesian War.
Alright. We are going to go ahead and start our tour. So here we go.
The city of Amphipolis was the site of one of the more unique battles of the Peloponnesian War. Two generals, the Athenian Cleon and the Spartan Brasidas, fought for this land in an effort to control the resources it provided. In the end, though, neither got what they wanted. Look for me when you finish your visit, and we can speak of what you've learned.
Figures, that's how that kind of works. You got two guys that are fighting for a resource, and then neither of them end up getting what they want. Story of war. So here we go. But before we go any further, we kind of need to understand the basis of this war. Your book goes into it just a little bit. It really is a conflict between the city-states of Athens and Sparta. It reaches a point on the Greek mainland where Athens is basically forming alliances after the conflicts with the Persians. And these alliances are very many. And they come up with their own name for this alliance system. It's called the Delian League. Now, the Delian League was more than just an alliance. It was basically the formation of an Athenian empire. And there were a lot of cities that wanted to leave, but Athens was like, no, you're not going to leave. One of the stipulations with this alliance was that city-states were required to pay tribute, meaning money, and this money would go to a particular island that the Athenian navy would defend. And while it all sounded well and good, Athens began to overstep its bounds a little bit, and they greatly started becoming kind of the bullies on the block. Sparta didn't like what was going on, and they wanted to stop the Athenian superiority on the Greek mainland. So, in response to it, Sparta formed its own league of alliances in the Peloponnese called the Peloponnesian League. And there you have it. You've got two leagues against one another, and it was only inevitable before these two leagues butted heads and started this conflict known as the Peloponnesian War.
The land that would come to be known as Amphipolis was originally part of Thrace, a region inhabited by formidable semi-nomadic horsemen. Thrace was rich in gold and silver mines. It was surrounded by lush forests, making it very attractive to outside parties like Greece and Persia. By 513 BCE, Persia had managed to conquer much of Thrace. But after their defeat in 479 BCE, Athens made a play for the land. They conquered the nearby island of Thasos in 465 BCE. But the military prowess of the Thracian riders kept them out of the country's interior. It was only in 436 BCE that Athens established a solid foothold in Thrace with the founding of Amphipolis, a city on the banks of the river Strymon.
So both Athenians and Spartans wanted to control this land, not just for the land itself, but for the resources that it would provide. This land had been fought over for generations. The Persians once controlled it, and then the Thracians once controlled it. And after the Greeks' conflict with the Persians, the Athenians began to step in and gained a foothold in this entire region. And this is where this picks up.
During the Peloponnesian War, the Spartan general Brasidas sought a way to subvert Athenian power across the Greek world. He set his sights on capturing the coast of Thrace, hoping to seize the resources the area provided. Brasidas knew that many of the Greeks living in Thrace hated the greed and brutality of their Athenian neighbors and decided to take advantage of the situation. He set off on an expedition to Amphipolis, accompanied by 1,000 hoplites and 700 helots, and arrived before the city in the winter of 424 BCE. At Amphipolis' ramparts, Brasidas announced that he preferred to take the city peacefully, and promised to allow safe passage to any inhabitants who wished to leave, in addition to sparing those who wanted to cooperate. This proposal was well received by the city's residents, and he was able to capture Amphipolis without striking a single blow.
Smart guy, Brasidas. He's so clever. He knows that he is clearly outmatched, so if he attempts to take Amphipolis by force, he's going to end up losing men. And he doesn't have a ton of men to begin with. He only took 1,000 soldiers and 700 helots, which were slaves, which is not a formidable group. And so instead of taking the city by force, he makes a deal with these people. The people of Amphipolis know and hate the Athenians. They hate their greed. They hate how poorly they're being treated by the Athenians. And so Brasidas plays on this. And he basically says, hey, I want to help you guys. If you want to leave, leave. But we're not going anywhere. And if you want to stay and help us, more power to you. Help us. And he gets Amphipolis under control very, very quickly and without a single casualty.
Brasidas' march on Amphipolis blindsided the Athenians. By the time they heard the news and dispatched the general Thucydides to defend Amphipolis, Brasidas had already rallied several nearby cities to help him defend the region from Athens' so-called tyranny. After half a day's journey from Thasos, Thucydides arrived at the port of Eion, but was unable to retake Amphipolis. Athens held Thucydides responsible for the loss of Amphipolis and forced the general into exile. In spite of Brasidas' achievements, Sparta did not send him reinforcements, which forced the general to negotiate a truce with Athens to hold on to the ground he gained.
So it's interesting that despite the fact that Brasidas takes Amphipolis and maintains it, that Sparta does not send any reinforcements to help him hold it. While on the opposition side, the Athenians exile their general for the failure of taking back Amphipolis. This probably would have played out much differently if Sparta had actually sent reinforcements. We're going to come to see the outcome of this, and it's pretty dramatic, and it's pretty crazy how it ends, at least from a historical standpoint.
The matter of how to deal with Amphipolis divided Athens. The politician Nicias, as well as the city of Sparta, hoped that peace could be negotiated. However, the popular Athenian statesman and general Cleon wanted to continue fighting the war. Indecision continued until 422 BCE, when Cleon was elected as one of Athens' strategists. This decision made it clear that the city's people were in favor of war. The truce was ended, and Cleon began his journey to Amphipolis, retaking small towns that had been conquered by Brasidas along the way. On arriving at the port of Eion, Cleon requested troops from the king of Macedonia. He also hired several Thracian mercenaries to bolster his force's numbers. Afterwards, all Cleon could do was wait for the remainder of his reinforcements.
So the Athenian politician Nicias makes a deal with Brasidas and basically forms a bit of a truce. Like, hey, we're not going to attack you, don't attack us. Let's try and resolve this peacefully. And a lot of Athenian people did not agree with this particular tactic. And one of the other politicians, a man by the name of Cleon, wanted to wage war. He wanted to continue the war with the Spartans. And it wasn't until 422 BC when he became one of the strategists of Athens that he finally got his wish to go back to war and break the truce with the Spartans. And in doing so, he arrives in the port, and all he's got to do is wait for reinforcements. He made a deal with Thracian mercenaries, and he also made a deal with the king of Macedonia for troops. So all he has to do is wait in this port with his men. But there's a problem with this. He's not a general. He is simply a statesman. He does not have any experience, and his men do not really trust him.
While they waited, the Athenian forces began to resent Cleon's hesitation to attack. They saw him as soft and incompetent, especially compared to their opponent, Brasidas. Sensing the tension, Cleon decided to act without waiting for reinforcements to arrive. He set out from the port of Aeon to observe Amphipolis, setting up a camp on a nearby hill. To Cleon's surprise, Amphipolis appeared to be completely unprotected, with no guards stationed at the city's gates and ramparts. However, the city's lack of protection was only an illusion. Even so, upon seeing this, Cleon regretted that he did not bring wooden towers, which would have allowed him to easily recapture the city.
So the city itself was not left undefended. It was basically nothing more than a Spartan trick. The Spartans are hiding and they're waiting, and they're observing Cleon and his forces to see what they are going to do.
Brasidas positioned his own troops in a nearby wooded area to get a better view of Cleon's army. When the Athenians began moving to set up camp, Brasidas returned to Amphipolis. He believed his army was less well-trained than the Athenians and decided to rely instead on cunning tactics and Cleon's inexperience as a military leader. Brasidas organized a two-pronged attack. He would personally lead a small raid, then one of his lieutenants would follow up with a second attack shortly after, disorienting the enemy. He had barely finished formulating his plan when he saw Cleon's army pack up and retreat back towards the coast. The cowardly display made Brasidas realize that perhaps victory would be easier than he thought.
And this is where things get interesting, because Cleon is not a great leader, and he's not very clear on his instructions to his men. So the fact that his men are packing up is actually kind of going against his orders.
After seeing Brasidas' troops return to Amphipolis, Cleon decided to fall back to the port of Aeon and once again wait for reinforcements. Unfortunately, his exact orders were confusing and contradictory, which left the Athenian forces in disarray. Brasidas took advantage of this confusion and began his attack. Cleon's forces panicked, which made them easy prey for the Spartans. 600 Athenians were killed, while the Spartans only lost 7 men. Cleon's remaining forces took refuge in Aeon, where the bodies of their comrades were eventually returned to them, though only after being stripped of their weapons.
Pretty dramatic turn of events. All because of the confusion of Cleon's orders to his men cost over 600 Athenian lives, and the Spartans only end up losing 7.
During the pitched battle between the Spartans and the Athenians, both Brasidas and Cleon were killed. The reports of their respective deaths reflect how they were perceived as military leaders. We know almost nothing about Cleon's death, other than that he was killed by a Thracian soldier. Brasidas, meanwhile, survived long enough to be taken back to Amphipolis, where he was informed of his victory. He was buried inside the city, which was considered an honor bestowed only upon heroes, and was celebrated as the true founder of Amphipolis.
It's an interesting turn of events because, you know, the city of Amphipolis was actually founded by the Athenians themselves. But after this particular battle, the people of Amphipolis decided to grant, you know, Brasidas the honors of being the hero of basically liberating the people of Amphipolis from Athenian dictatorship. So it's really kind of interesting that he's honored in this particular way.
The Battle of Amphipolis temporarily put an end to the hostilities between Athens and Sparta. The Athenian forces returned to Piraeus, while Sparta called back the reinforcements they'd sent for Brasidas. The death of both Brasidas and Cleon encouraged the two cities to push for peace. The negotiations took time, but Sparta and Athens eventually agreed to return to the way things were before the Peloponnesian War. The resulting treaty became popularly known as the Peace of Miches. Throughout the Greek world, it was mostly agreed that Sparta had lost the war, in spite of Brasidas' heroic efforts. The sentiment was rooted in the fact that Sparta had failed to end Athens' domination over Greece, something they had promised to do at the start of the war.
So despite Brasidas' heroics, and despite the fact that Spartans were able to take Amphipolis and conquer this particular area and claim its resources, it's still considered to be a Spartan loss in terms of the grand scheme of the First Peloponnesian War. This 50-year peace that was struck after this particular battle was not 50 years of peace. In fact, this peace lasted a grand total of 6 years before the Second Peloponnesian War opened up, all because the Athenians became a little bit too impatient and a little bit too greedy. So this is going to be it for the stream today. We will get you guys later on. I'm thinking maybe next week we'll do another one. What you guys need to be doing now for the rest of class, you guys need to head back to Canvas. There are a few quiz questions that you guys need to take. After which, that is going to be that for class today. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the stream, and we will see you next time.